All right, so we are a couple minutes after the hour. Um, let's kick off. So this webinar is ready for the next normal. We're outlining what the new blueprint for L&D capability is in this new virtual world. I'm Patrick Thomas. I'm a consulting lead at Leo. So I've been with the organization for going on nearly 15 years, 14 years, and generally work with organizations that have large workforces that are distributed. So, anywhere of 10,000 plus employees. And I real passion around strategic design on the content side, but also where that meets technologies and how the technologies need to enable good design.
I'm Alex Steer. I'm a learning consultant at Leo. I've been with Leo and Epic, as was quite a long time ago, for about 14 years now, same as Patrick. Again, working with multiple clients, big companies. My main area of focus, because I came up through the learning design route, has been around large blended programs and thinking about curriculum designs. And my real interest is in gathering stories, actually, and really listening to the sort of the authentic things that we can learn from people's employees and what they're telling us.
Nice. You are an expert in design and strategic thinking as well, and I really appreciate the fact that you're on and supporting on this webinar. So thank you, Alex. So who's Leo? For those of you who don't know us, we are experts in world-class learning design done at a distance. As an organization, we focus in on 4 key areas: strategy, technology and platform design, content design, and then how that all works together in terms of delivery. We are part of the Learning Technologies Group, which has a range of companies that from talent management, learning management systems and software to games as well. So for today, again, I want to invite your challenge all the way through. So feel free, keep your fingers ready on the questions pane there, and we'll be monitoring those. We've got a producer on hand as well to support. So as you have thoughts that you want to contribute, please do. What we want to do is look at the 2019 L&D capabilities that were priorities last year, and then reflect on those and see how those probably changed. We think they have in the last 6-9 months, and see what you think, how you are responding to those challenges as we go. So I don't know if you will recognize this. This spider diagram is from Towards Maturity. They are now owned by Emerald Works International. And Towards Maturity since 2003 has been doing longitudinal studies on L&D and L&D capabilities. They've also been studying various other things about approaches, and they do benchmark studies by certain industries. So really good resource to have to hand. But this particular study on L&D capability has been going since the early days. It's a pretty big study. So they generally look at responses from about 7,500 learning professionals. So huge range of organizations, a range of industry types as well. And what they do is they look at what are the stated priorities, so that outer ring, what are the stated priorities for L&D capabilities, and then they look at various sort of subsets of the data to do an analysis. The middle one, or the bright pink one, is the top deck, and the top deck are generally companies that are demonstrating that they are using technologies and design to good effect, so that they are reporting that they are improving efficiency, improving sales, improving communication with their workforce. So this is the group of companies that are leveraging leveraging their L&D and their technologies to good effect. And then we've just put in UK and private sector just to give you just a bit of a benchmark. But if we go around it, I know it might be a little bit hard for some of you to see. The report's available. You can get it through Emerald Works today if you'd like. Important to note, you've got the 2019 stated ambitions that go around, and they're all quite high because they were stated priorities that they wanted everybody to be, that everybody was saying they wanted to achieve. And you'll see that classroom delivery over there on the top right, quite high for a lot. And also learning management, project management tended to be quite high as well. But where things starts to sort of slip, and where there is a large delta between the 2019 priorities or stated aims and where they are performing, are things around data analysis, virtual classroom, webinar delivery, digital content development, facilitating collaborative learning. So you can see there are some where in the thinner parts of that spider diagram, you can see there's still quite a delta between where people are and what the stated priorities were. That's back in 2019. Just thought it was a good idea to look at that data then.
Yeah, I think interesting to see. Probably things have changed quite significantly since then.
And so, even back then, we know that the top performing organizations, that top deck, had significant gaps in some key areas. In the data analytics, blended learning, the facilitating and managing social and collaborative learning, digital content development, technology and information management. So these were all pretty big gaps in 2019. But let's recall, and I think there's a big difference, in 2019, that was about optimizing performance. I think that's changed.
Yeah, I think, it's given all the things that 2020 has thrown at us, it's no surprise that, I think you can probably safely say that things have shifted from that thriving to more of a batten down the hatches, surviving kind of mentality. And I think, now we're beginning to see that people are coming through that sort of trough of the change curve. We're seeing a shift out of that initial reacting phase, and we've spoken about that on previous webinars. I think for some of the larger organizations, that change curve was a lot shorter. They made the switch to digital with speed. They had funding behind them to be able to do that, and then they've been able to start that refining phase earlier. But for smaller and less digitally mature organizations, I think that's been extremely difficult. So we've got that sort of initial reaction, but now we need to start thinking about how do we optimize virtual learning and make it better. What are we going to do to actually start delivering at scale that goes beyond just having a webinar delivering on a PowerPoint.
And we're certainly seeing that organizations, there are organizations in all three of those areas. The more mature organizations are generally the larger ones that have had really good investment in their learning technologies, and they've been able to move pretty quickly through those three phases.
So thinking about those priorities from 2019, they haven't completely gone away. We're seeing design and delivery shifting, and it's shifting towards that optimized phase. So thinking about that, we wanted to give you some new capabilities and approaches to help measure yourselves and your teams against. We identified 6 things that we've been seeing with our clients, and we work with a huge range of clients. We've got over, I think it's something like 100 projects that are live at any one time, and we've been hearing firsthand about how people are developing new design and delivery mindsets to cope with the changes that 2020 is bringing.
So we're gonna look at these individually. We're gonna talk about some of the individual capabilities or mindsets that we're picking up under each one of these areas. We'll invite your comment on them to see if these resonate with you. But we wanted to go to the first question. Wanted to pick your brains. So to what extent are you ready for the next normal? And by next normal, we're talking about, you know, I guess you could be on a range between right now I can't deal with the changes. I'm just trying to get by. You could be in this place where, well, frankly, I don't know what the next normal is. You need to tell us what the next normal is, and that's absolutely fair. Some of you might be in a place where you're happy to catch up. Just need to know how to do that. And some of you might be feeling pretty confident that you're able to tackle what's next. I guess I wanted to check in with you and see where you are, and to what extent you think you are ready for the next normal. So we've got a poll question here that's coming in. And let's close it and see how you have answered. So it seems as though, I'm just right now pulling it up.
Bit of a spread.
It is a spread. So 43% feel confident they can tackle what's next. And we absolutely applaud that. The next is 32% feeling I'm not sure what the next normal is. And that's absolutely fine. We're gonna, I don't think anybody does, but there are some core skills and capabilities that we're seeing are needed, and we'll explore those in this to make you more resilient, to make an L&D team more resilient. And then 24% feel that I'll catch up when you tell me what I need to know. Well, we'll tell you what you need to know in just a moment. So let's start with the virtual first design. And everything that we're going to be talking about today really is, we're going to be talking about in the context of virtual first, because that's the world that we're in. And in terms of virtual session design, it is incredibly different to face-to-face, your designs for face-to-face. Virtual designing for virtual changes the way that you are expecting the pace of delivery, how you're engaging with learners, how you are executing various activities, who's required to run the sessions, and much, much more. So we would be saying at this point, throw away any thinking that you have around that you can just take a face-to-face session that you've got and just convert it like for like and be done. In fact, you need to be looking at your sessions and the objectives and the expectations for engagement from the ground up. You need to be reconsidering it altogether.
Yeah, I think that's fair. One of the big things that I've been seeing is, you know, the sort of the unique challenge around harnessing the energy and the emotion that you can get from a face-to-face session, and that face-to-face delivery. It can create a real buzz, and it's difficult to recreate that buzz in a virtual session. So trying to think around, you know, how you take that magic of a face-to-face delivery and bottle it for online can be very difficult. I've got an example actually that I've been working with a client who is delivering an onboarding experience, and they had to very quickly pivot, you know, at the beginning of the year when everything kicked off to online delivery for what was a much admired face-to-face onboarding experience, and they had to do that virtually overnight. You know, it's been well received, the things that they've done, but the next step is to start putting some of that magic back into it, because it's just, whilst it's hitting off all the learning points, it doesn't have quite that sense of fun and that sort of buzz that's associated with having a really good live event. So I think there needs to be a focus in designing for that virtual environment that goes beyond thinking just about how you leverage the technology. You also need to be looking at how you develop your facilitation skills and how you can create like a real world sort of digital blend that maybe has some tangible artifacts as well that you can bring in to make people feel really important and part of that team, especially when you're thinking about onboarding.
really good point. So in terms of new capabilities, so I think this is maybe more about doing more with your virtual design hat on. So absolutely redesign your programs. Don't do a like for like conversion, because that doesn't work. And we've seen that to not work in some fantastic ways. So take stock of your virtual landscape. And that means look at all the tools that you've got available and use them. Use the tools that deliver to best effect what you need your audience to be doing, and that helps to sort of help you visualize the content or the challenge that you're facing. So you might be using multiple tools in any session. And so a new capability is the fact that your team is gonna have to get quite adept at using multiple tools that perhaps historically they had only needed really only one. And I think it's important now, and we're seeing it, people are doing their content audits because they are reusing the content that they've got. There are pearls out there. You have good content and resources that are there. A lot of the times this content is being hidden by other things that are out of date or are just ineffectual. So do the work, do some research into what is working, locate the useful resources, and then your job is to elevate those useful resources. So that's, there's a curation task in that, but also a knowledge management task that your teams will need to have.
Yeah, and in terms of things to avoid, obviously we've said, don't just try and convert an hour of face-to-face learning into an online webinar, because it doesn't work. And try not to rely too heavily on PowerPoints. When we're thinking about all the tools out there that we can use and what might be available, try maybe to think about how to make the experience active. Look for things where you can have more of a workshop feel to what you're doing, so that there's practical application and tasks that you can run together. And just on that point, actually thinking, as designers, as L&D professionals, we've got a duty to keep experimenting with that. And to try and keep up to date with what's out there. Things are changing quite quickly. New tools are coming online all the time. And I think, people are taking advantage of this situation that we're in to think about, how we can think differently and approach things in a new way. So have a look and keep up to date with what's out there. But also re-examine how you're using tools that you already have at your disposal, because there might be ways that you can think differently about what you've already got and look for ways of encouraging that collaboration.
And I would have said that a new sort of baseline capability for L&D is not only the use of tools, so yes, the use of these tools, but also that there is a sort of a capability to design the entire learning experience virtually. So that's the end-to-end is a new capability. So not just looking at a particular tool, but it might be thinking about the entire learning experience and all of the tools and all of the activities that you're planning. That now is probably a baseline that your team needs to have and be ready to work with immediately.
I think there's also something to be said about how you start breaking down your sessions. So if you're thinking about moving people in and out of different technologies, or thinking about how you're going to get people into breakout groups and things like that, you need to approach it in the same way, with the same sort of mindset that you would if you were thinking about setting up a physical room. Like, how would you move that learner around the space? How do you build in a journey that makes sense in terms of switching people in and out between different technologies? Sometimes people might be unfamiliar with some of the collaborative tools, and you need to build in space for that. And you need to perhaps check logins and things like that in advance, but also really practice on how you're going to switch people in and out of things.
And so that speaks to the point around having online facilitation skills. And so that probably needs to be built into how we are defining the capability of our teams and how we're measuring the performance of our individual team members, that they have facilitation skills. So how you define that still needs to be worked on. But online facilitation skills is still very different than somebody who's doing ILT work.
And the final sort of point I wanted to raise on that one actually is just to think very briefly about physical assets, because they do still matter. You know, that tangible connection to the real world. If you can post something out to people, I know it's not necessarily always the most practical thing, but it can be a really good way to make people feel part of something when, you know, we're all so spread out now.
It's a good point. People love to receive packages. Anybody who's had a home delivery these days knows what a joy that is. But you can do that. You can do that the same when you are sending things to your cohorts and your team members. Think about that. That's a good tip. Right. So let's hear from you. In your questions pane, can you let us know? So we always get fantastic insights from you. So let us know any sort of tips, insights that you have that you're using with your participants. So we'd love to hear back from you. If you put your answers in the questions pane, we'll do a readout. So there's a note here about making things much more modular, so smaller with individual components, and using breakout rooms to enable more profound conversations between individuals, I think is a great idea. And that seems to be getting a lot of buzz as well. Somebody who has incorporated Zoom, and let's see, Zoom keeping to the beginning of each session. I don't know what that is, Sean, if you can come back to us on it. For some of these, so you've got some fantastic ideas that are pouring in. What we will do as well is we can capture these and we'll send them back out to the group. That's a shout out to our producer. Sorry if I've just made things difficult for us, but I think there's some really good things that are coming in here. So somebody here shouted out with Mural doing for whiteboarding. So there's Mural and Miro, and I think those are fantastic.
Got Jamboards on there as well.
Totally. Also really good. Somebody here said about not being too prescriptive about the session. And that's something we want to pick up here in the next sections as well, because now more than ever, you're having to adapt in your design and your delivery based upon where people are and where they're at. We'll come on to that in a second. I love, Annie, that you've just put in that there's wiggle time of about 4 minutes to move every 20 to 40 minutes. We're going to come upon that as well. So when we're talking about wellness and well-being, that's a really important shout out. Slido polls, also really good way, and polls are a really good way to get people interacting. So thanks for putting that in.
I like this one, leveraging the element of surprise, do an unexpected thing.
Absolutely.
That's a great one.
Jennifer has talked about doing brain breaks, and that's that more than ever. So that cognitive overload we need to be really conscious of. So we're going to move on. We're going to capture those ideas. We're going to send them back out to the group, I promise. And I'm apologizing in advance to my producer. And also Slack here is a great channel. So adding in additional communications channels are a brilliant way when you're creating these virtual environments. So let's move on to collaboration, because I think that's been, some of you were alluding quite directly to collaboration and how you're increasing social learning strategies in what you're doing. And so, we saw that from the 2019 research from Emerald Works that facilitating and managing social collaborative learning was both a priority and a gap in 2019. And I think we're seeing a big rush to bridge that capability gap. And just from the people that I know that are on this group, and I can see who you are when you registered, I can see by the responses that you've been putting in here to the questions pane that I think you all have jumped that gap. And you may have had to jump that gap, or you may have already been working with collaborative and social learning strategies in your designs beforehand. But we are also seeing that it's now becoming a core competency for learning and development teams, without a doubt. And so we're seeing them adapt slightly in the last 6 months, and some of the ways that these collaboration strategies or social learning strategies have changed is that we're seeing task-based learning now, where the activities are real business projects. So so you used to call it in old currency, it was action learning sets, but where the designer is asking people to work on tasks that are absolutely related to work, not a side shoot up, so that it feels more relevant. And so that's a big shift. So we're not keeping people in a scenario, a fictional scenario, but we're actually asking people to work on real things. We're also seeing communities of practice that are coming to the fore more, and that I think has more to do with helping people get to that single source of truth more now than ever. And like we're doing today, just like this session here, involving the wider community for self-support. And I think that also is coming to the fore. So what are some examples? I'll do a couple of quick examples. So there's one example with a US heavy goods manufacturer, and they're basing their customer experience training around storytelling, which I think is fab. And so, underpinning that is collecting the stories and sharing the stories of really good customer experience. And so their team is in the process and working through frameworks that support people in capturing the stories. So how to do your own user-generated video. Maybe these are audio stories, and how to capture those and where to save them and what to do with them and how to promote those. So they're doing an entire campaign that probably would have been a learning, like a training program around customer experience, but now it's all about stories and storytelling. And then there's a European food manufacturer. We're kicking off right now another project where they have explicitly said that the participants' experience and bonding as a cohort was just as important as the marketing knowledge that they would be developing in the training. And I don't think that emphasis on cohort rapport would have been a stated aim a year ago. And I think that has been influenced by where we are today.
I think that's safe to say. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy win, but once it's embedded, having some kind of collaborative framework like that is hugely effective, and it can just really lengthen the shelf life of whatever program or initiative you're looking at.
Right. So there's I think we've got to find ways to be able to populate authentic stories. I think we've got to have a marketing mentality campaign, which means selling in ideas. Alex, have you got ideas?
Yeah, I mean, giving guidance on how people can contribute, making sure it's really obvious. People don't have a lot of bandwidth right now for new things, so making it easier, the better. I mean, that's a standard anyway, but more so now than ever. Having a facilitator that's keeping those materials up to date, bringing people back to stuff. For your cohort sessions, like you were saying previously, ground it in real world stuff. If we're asking for people to engage with things, and we're looking at generating that goodwill, and having the bandwidth to be able to do things, making it a practical task, the solving real problems that actually affect their day job, is the way forward. You know, people are going to have a lot more to give for something like that than they would for something that's too aspirational.
Great, thank you. So what's new? You know, in terms of new L&D capabilities, there is something around a core competency of creating centers of excellence and everything that is required in the knowledge management of those centers of excellence, in the curation of the learning and making sure that you identify what is priority learning in that single source of truth. And enabling learners to be able to find their way to that single source of truth, I think is now more than ever a core capability, just because people need to be able to get to the answers quickly and know that they are the right answers.
Yeah, I think we just need to be careful about overloading learners, you know, because that can be quite a big problem right now.
Fair point. Yep, fair point. So we've got another question for you, if we may. You know, are there some specific tools that you are finding most useful in your collaboration? I know that you were talking about Kahoot earlier, which we saw. Are there any other tools that you're finding really useful that sort of support this collaboration and communities of practice that you're using? And we'll do a shout out. So Teams, Nick has said, Teams is great. Teams has got this. What we love about Teams is the ability to have both the call and to be able to be sharing documents and moving documents around. Somebody here has got Promote platform and OneNote. So we're using, here's a group that's using Saba LMS and Adobe Connect and their social feature combined. Nice, that's good. And another person that's integrated both Teams, Zoom, and WebEx. That's good.
Google Docs as well. Miro.
Google Docs, yeah, combined with Miro. That's nice. Yeah. NovoEd, yep. SharePoint, good. Nice to see that NovoEd and SharePoint you're using together.
And Yammer also has got a few votes there.
Yeah, fab. Thanks all. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is this domain of action and activation. So for us, this is really about turning knowledge and knowledge acquisition into action, ensuring that you've got active participation, ensuring that the learning is integrated and brought back into the workplace. And fundamentally, we think that learning teams now have to design for transfer of learning. I think they always had to. I think now more than ever, they're having to design for the transfer of learning back into the workplace. And then there's a special nuance, what is the workplace? So what does that transfer look like when the workplace might be your living room? Building support with the managers sort of as participants in learning, we are seeing. So we are seeing managers as coaches for some of these bigger initiatives. Now, if you're going to do that, you've got to remember that you've got to include the managers in your design so that you're not now overloading your managers, and that the tasks and activities that you set out for managers is appropriate and works for them. You don't want to be designing in things that feel artificial. Building in space practice, building in mentoring schemes as well.
And I think, you know, there's probably a call out here, you know, now we're not actually occupying the same physical space as our line managers and things like that. That, you know, there's something about observed behavior and behavioral change in the workplace that I think is harder to quantify and harder to actually spot these days. So, you know, we need to make sure that we're having a strong support framework, that the line manager buy-in comes during the design phase and the active participation, and that you're looking at coaching and mentoring programs that are actually set up, supported, and part of that sort of channel of communication back and forth. I know it's not new, but I think it needs greater commitment from people in this space, because you can't see things physically happen.
So when you are thinking about your learning as a workforce enablement, you are thinking about learning for performance change and performance improvement. And so what that means that your team is going to have to be adept at having conversations about what does performance change look like in that role, in that function. What does that mean for creating a space for that change to happen? So there is a new capability there that probably already existed for some key people within your team, but now I think needs to happen. I think everybody, it now is sort of the level bar that everybody needs to be able to talk about learning in terms of performance and performance change. So, there are some things that you've got to do now to enable that. So you've got to keep content up to date. You've got to keep it fresh and relevant. So, and relevance is key here. If people are seeing that the content and what you're asking people to review is not relevant, you've lost them. And we've talked a bit about keeping managers involved, which is really important. Alex, have you got any ideas?
Yeah, there's something about some of the bigger companies asking for dashboards that line managers can quickly access and see how their teams are doing. They can target specific support and prompt recommendations, which I think is a really great idea. It ties into that sort of whole cycle. You're not just releasing a program and then walking away. There's feedback loops built in. And I think the other one is don't design in a silo. Obviously you've got to involve the relevant stakeholder groups, especially when you're designing in terms of the tools for transfer of learning.
Good. And so, some core capabilities that L&D need to have that we are seeing as well. Space practice design, really important. Coaching and coaching as part of and integrated into your training plans.
There's a lot more like practical things as well. So like guides and top tips and things. I'm seeing a lot more of that. Making things distilled and really easy to access to try and help people to have enough space to be able to put that into practice in the workplace.
Hey, how about a poll question? Let's see. To what extent are you still in the event mode for your learning? So this is sort of single instance learning. And we'll open a poll. So 1 is where we think about where we are still in this world of single events only, and 5 is in a world where we're in a continuous learning organization. I think we're probably fair to close. We've got still a few more coming in. So just about over 60% is right down the middle, where sometimes it's events and sometimes there's going to be probably initiatives where people are going to be learning over a longer period of time. So, both offer their challenges. When you're in a world of single events, you're probably always having to chase people to do the learning. It's probably around compliance, though we think more can be done around compliance. And learning becomes a thing that has to get done. In a world where you've got continuous learning, there seems to be a lot of chat about shifting the responsibility of learning to the learners. And yes, to a degree. We would argue that if you're gonna presume that all learners in your organization have a responsibility for their own learning, then you better have really clear learning pathways available, that there are opportunities for reward and recognition for having done that and going beyond, and that there is a culture that enables people to do the learning, that managers are giving the space for people to do that learning. So I get this idea that learning is in these learning organizations, that people have a responsibility. Organizations also have a responsibility, and all of those things are quite big nuts to crack. They're hard to do. So another big one is around sensitivities, especially around empathy. And this is very much a sign of the times. This is about being sensitive to the fact that people are now coming in with other things on their mind. And in fact, not everybody's going to be in the same place. Not everybody's going to have the same setup. Some people might actually be attending your workshop or your event on the, walking from room to room, and we have had that. So it's being aware that you need to make accommodations for every single person that's in your workshop, or that you're thinking about accommodating every individual. And sometimes really small things can make a big difference. So there's no question that L&D has always had to consider the learner in the learning context, but now it has to do. But now it is exceptionally important because it's changed on how the expectations you have on how people are accessing.
Yeah, I've got a good example of that actually. It's only sort of small things, but it really did make a huge difference to how the workshop went. So it was for a fairly sort of high stakes kind of workshop for some external stakeholders, and they needed to impress the people within the workshop as well as us sort of running and facilitating things. And the client invited the participants to, turn off their cameras if they needed to, or if they needed to step away from the workshop for a bit. That was fine. They set that boundary out straight away, and they said, do what you need to do. Put a message in the chat so that we know that you're gone, and we know when you come back, and then we can pick things up and we can actually sort of move you along to the next part of the session, because there were quite a few participants. There was a lot going on. Not everybody was in the same space and the same situation. So we kind of wanted to make sure that there were ways for them to move about in their space and not miss out. We also encouraged them, to take some breaks. We built some breaks in. We made sure that people were getting up. We were encouraging them to go and drink water and things like that. I know it sounds a little bit fluffy, but it's remembering to have that sort of sense of mindfulness and trying to empathize with people when you're on a big session like that.
Oh, I've got fluffy for you. There's the World Bank has got a leadership program, and the World Bank is normally under a great deal of stress and pressure. If you are working for the World Bank, you are on your toes all the time. So they've got an ongoing leadership program where, in fact, the leaders are the most busy people within already a stressful situation, who are going to be coming into their leadership cohorts, online cohorts, in a heightened sense of anxiety and stress. And there's no getting around that because that's their workday. So what this program is doing is, at the start of every cohort, there is a mindfulness breathing exercise that they do. And it's a moment where everybody just stops and are given permission to just breathe, count their breathing, think about their breathing, and relax. And that is the way that they release the pressure and the stress going into it. So,
I've actually done one of those, and I was a little bit dubious of it at first, but actually it really helped focus you. So,
I think that in terms of L&D capabilities, that that you're aware of your audience, you're aware of where they are, and you're accommodating that to best effect. And you're remembering to take the breaks. Those are all really important. In terms of some of the capabilities, hey, we're not asking, and nobody's expecting L&D to become mindfulness gurus, but we are seeing a value in online facilitators to be aware of mental well-being and physical well-being, and making sure that they accommodate for that in their designs. And understanding, just in simply understanding that you are in somebody's personal space, and there's this blurred line of workspace and personal space. The expectations that you may have need to change to support that. So that's being really careful about how much additional stuff you are going to be giving people in a learning context, because you are going to potentially be adding to a level of stress and pressure on these people.
Mm. And I think also you need to be a bit kind to yourself as well. So accept that you might not get everything done, and try and be okay with that, because
That's
there are
totally
more
fair.
distractions and more things going on.
That's absolutely fair. So you as a facilitator, you probably aren't going to get, you need to make some space that you may not get it all done and be okay with that. We are curious to know how you deal with this sense of isolation. And so the question that we've got here is, it can be lonely out there. And how is it that you are making people feel part of something? So some people are using video to make that personal connection. Absolutely agree that video is a really powerful way to do it.
Keep
Jesse,
classes small.
Jesse, I love that. So Jesse has said, keep classes small. I know that there was an initial push to say, well, now that we're online, we can just throw more people at it, and that is not the case. So keeping classrooms small is important. Sharing a personal story, I love that. And inviting people to have a shared experience, yes, absolutely. Sheldon has shouted out that social time embedded in classes is really good. Even social time where it's just at the beginning and just allowing people to have the chit chat. So you build in that social time just even at the beginning is really important.
Being vulnerable as a facilitator. That was Jessica's. That's pretty hard, isn't it? It's being out there. Yeah.
Yep, but really important. You're experts. You're going to invite experts in to do expert sessions. And sometimes experts are going to fall back on their knowledge, which means that they're just going to start speaking. But if they tell a story and they talk about how they may have screwed up in what they were doing, you warm to them immediately. Chat in virtual rooms is a suggestion here during breaks. I really like that. And we're going to chat afterwards as well. So for those of you that have to leave us, that's great. That's fine. We'll have this virtual green room in a second where we can continue the chat. Thank you very much for your comments here. So we wanted to make a point here about using emotion, energy, and imagination in your designs. These are all levers for learning, but should be done with care. So, mentioned that even a passive leader-led event can be made more emotional and more exciting, and that's done through storytelling, just as some of you had mentioned before.
Some of the the most powerful ways that you can do that is through the stories and the authentic things that are coming out of the business. Ask people to make simple user-generated videos or content. Get those authentic voices out there. I think that's really important.
We've got an organization. I know we keep saying an organization that, and I wish we could give the names. We'd need to get clearance on using names, and so we apologize. We do have a client who is redesigning their live online learning, where most of the knowledge is expected to be done in advance, which means that the facilitated scenario, that facilitated event, is about taking scenarios and getting people to work through the scenarios and getting people to sort of to build upon those and to apply their learning in a new context. And so that creates quite a bit of energy around what would have been a dry topic before. So in terms of a new capabilities, storytelling is absolutely fundamental. Alex, you're the absolute queen at storytelling in learning.
I think there's so much you can say about it, but look at authentic ones from the business. Look for real case studies. Look for getting that information. Or you can also look at metaphorical ones. They're slightly harder to do. I would say probably focus on scenarios rather than theory. I think that's a good way to get people engaging with things, and that's where you can bring in some of the slightly more unrealistic events, get teams doing things, building things, explaining things to each other. And that sense of activity, I think, is really, really important to bring things to life and just lift the energy levels, because we're all sat at our desks for hours and hours and hours at a time, often without as many breaks as we used to get because we're in back-to-back calls or whatever. So I think anything that boosts that energy is really, really important. And help people to understand why the topic actually matters to them, make it really relevant in that respect.
Rian's got a question here about, do we have a simple format for storytelling? And there are a number of storytelling models that are out there, and you can use storytelling models like who's the hero, who's the villain, what's the plot. You could do that. You could talk about archetypes of users. You can just invite people to tell the story about the legend of the thing that happened in that, in the organization 10 years ago.
Business urban myths, I think, is quite a good one, actually. Yeah. I've had a few good ones like that recently.
Yeah. So new core skills. Well, guess what? The team's got to be good at experts at cameras, lighting, managing remote participation, all the fun stuff. Get up to speed on some storytelling models and share them with the team and experiment with them. So we would have said, a year ago, it would be impossible to do to have a session where you get people to physically build something together over an entire day, do it as a synchronous event, and do it virtually. We would have said no way, no chance of it. But we're actually now experimenting with the Lego Serious Play. And so this is an open source program. It's using Legos as a model to get people to talk about. It's basically using the construction of a model as a metaphor for telling a story and exploring. So look into it as a model for you. It does require you to set up. Historically, it would have been a virtual session, but it can now be done virtually. Our own design director, Andrew Jolly, is now certified to conduct these virtually, but anybody can use the model. You just have to use the model that they have set out for you, and we'll tell you that it does require an extraordinary amount of setup and care to get it right, because you have to get the lighting right, the cameras right, the layout right. Everybody has to have the Legos in advance, but it is enormously effective. And it is profound in the way that people engage with the Legos and virtually. So we would absolutely say this can be done. You can do an entire day workshop of people building things together virtually and keeping people absolutely engaged. It can be done. This is another visual of that, and sort of how you have to set up your stage, and then you have to label things. We can support you through that, or look online for more information about it. But that's to say, there are things that we can move to in a virtual world, and we can still keep the integrity of it. So measurement. Measurement and gathering data on the impact of what you're doing hasn't gone away. We would say that, let's be honest, the measuring data, you're doing profound data draws right now when you don't have the technology to do it. If you're in an organization that doesn't have the learning analytics platform already in place, you probably are not an organization that's going to be getting some funding to do it now, because the funding isn't there anymore. But for those organizations that are doing it, they are keeping the light on. But what we are saying now is measurement hasn't gone away. Measurement is still important. It has changed. So For us, it's about now collecting stories and ensuring that when you are running your sessions, you are collecting the stories of success and you are holding those, because you will be asked later, what have you done in terms of these programs and how you've adapted? And what is the impact of your pivot and your changes? What is it, what's the impact of what you have done to the business? So I think you need to be moving to a world in which you are collecting these stories and saving these stories. And that's a safe place to be, because even just talking about the stories of success is a good place to be when you can't be luxuriating in XAPI data draws and new Excel spreadsheets, when you are actually just trying to survive and get content out there.
I think there's also something to be said just around building buy-in from other managers as well, and for the learners themselves to see the impact that the learning's having. So by capturing those stories, you're showing what the impact is on people's day jobs. So
let's get the last poll question in if we can. And just want to check to see, how has your measurement of learning shifted in the last 8 months? If we can open that. And we can probably close it now. So right down the middle, 52%, same as before. It is business as usual. There's a question as to whether business as usual was you doing the measurement that you've always wanted to, or that you needed to, or whether that was business as usual as yeah, we'll get to that. We need to get to that, but that's down the road.
I was thinking maybe it's the LMS is capturing the data, and if that's already in place.
Good engagement data is also really important. So, and 26% says that we're doing better at it, and that makes me feel so good. And 21% says that it's backburnered. Well, that's not surprising, because I actually thought that there was going to be more of you that are just trying to survive. So, we've shared this model with you before. It's a model about, that you're designing, when you're designing learning, that you are designing with the business goals in mind. And then you can go back and look at, after you've done your learning objectives, you can go back and look at whether you've achieved the business goal. So that's aligning your design to the impact of the business. Take a snap of this. This is a framework which we designed for big hotels, chain of companies or group of companies, and you'll see that this model is very similar to the model that you just saw. So it's very much about looking at what are the goals, what are the performance goals, then you do your learning objectives, then you do your design, then you pilot it, and then you make changes as required. Take a snap of that. What's really good about a model like this, your organization, the way you do it, the processes that enable this will all have to be personalized to your own context. But this will be a good starter for 10 if you're looking to do a strategy. And so, just to reiterate, look at collecting stories of substance. Go to the places where your data already exists. For those of you in that 21% that says backburnered, go to the places that are where data is easy, and it might have to do with looking at simple engagement stuff like completion stats or page visits. You could do those. Those are all very useful. In terms of capabilities, we think that L&D teams need to have survey development and analytics skills now. So I think that your learning and development team need to be able to survey large audiences. And so those are skills that you need to have in-house. Also around a sort of competence in designing guidance for user-generated video and where you collect those videos, and then managing that data as well. So that's probably what we've got, and I know we are at the hour. That's so what we wanted to do. You know, we've looked at virtual first design. We've looked at collaboration and social learning strategies. So we've looked at some of the capabilities and mind shift changes that L&D teams need to now have in place in order to work with the context of a horrible 2020. We think that these capabilities are probably going to continue to evolve. We're going to continue to let you know about the ones that we hear about. We feel it's really important to be able to share these with you so that you are aware of them. We think it's important for you all to be sharing as well. So continue sharing good practice so that what we are doing is effective and sensitive to the context in which everybody is working with. And before we let you go, there is coming up, we've got another webinar on the 25th, which is around building a learner academy. That came from a request from one of you in one of our webinars. So we're going to explore that in another webinar on the 25th. We're also going to then share a blog link for you, which is 9 important things that we've learned about distance learning and lockdown. So we will share that blog with you.
We've also, just to add to that, we've got a quick survey that we'd like to ask if you wouldn't mind completing on measuring the impact of business learning, that we can pop a link in as well for that.
Fab. So at that, we'll end the session, but we will stay on. We will invite you to our virtual green room, take any questions and have a chat. We know that we put out a lot of information here, but we love your challenge and we love your questions. So keep them coming. If you can stay on, we will stay on as well, and to keep that conversation going. If you have to go, thank you very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining.